Welcome to this edition of Under the Radar for Saturday, June 25th, and I think it's time for some updates. Remember June Chu, Dean of Pearson College at Yale University, who propelled herself to fame with a few incendiary Yelp reviews. Probably her best was, to put it simply, if you're white trash, this is the perfect night out for you. This establishment is definitely not authentic by any stretch of any imagination and perfect for those low-class folks who believe this is a real night out. Well, you have to admire her candour. Now, if you remember this story, the university initially stood behind Chu and praised her for doing the right thing because she claimed to have learned from the experience. But then they were forced to back away from that solidarity when it was revealed that Chu had written more than the 2 reviews that she had initially admitted to. This led Chu to being placed on administrative leave and being barred from taking part in commencement activities. Well, it looks like Ms. Chu has had time to consider her position at Yale and has now left Yale altogether. And so I think it's only fitting to use Chu's own words from one of her infamous Yelp reviews. I'm sure McDonald's would hire you. Now moving on to Australia's best representative of toxic identity politics. I speak of course of Yasmin Abdel-Magied, who just can't stop making overtly stupid statements. Here she is at the Australian National University, ironically invited on a panel to talk about leadership with a bunch of academics, even though she's not either of those things, and makes this statement about representative government in Australia.
The traditional parliamentary system, look at the photo of the House of Representatives. It does not represent anyone, and it doesn't represent me, and doesn't represent the people that I know. And I get incredibly frustrated by this idea of we just need to tell them that they've got it wrong.
Andrew Bolt did a good job of taking this stupidity apart.
In fact, Abdel-Magied completely misunderstands the meaning of represent. She believes that when a politician represents someone, they must actually look like them. And that's simply false. My local member is a woman. Does that mean she can't represent me as a man? But even if you do believe in identity politics, fact is, Parliament does already look like a lot of people, whether they are white or Chinese or Aboriginal, whether they're women or Muslim or Christians or Jews or whatever. Parliament does already look like a lot of people, but apparently those people are nobodies to Abdel-Magied and her friends.
And that's right, Abdel-Magied's identitarian ideology is the antithesis to the idea of an integrated society with shared values, where race, gender and religion are largely irrelevant considerations. Abdel-Magied's idea of representative government is tribalist. Only people of your tribe that look like you can represent you. It would be like a mini United Nations within Australia. Well, like all Australians, she can do something about it if she's not happy with her representatives. She can vote them out, or she can run for office herself. Let's hear what she has to say about that idea.
You know how to get to office? I have to go through pre-selection, which works really well, and I have to go through all these other systems which, for women and for people of colour, are actually biased.
Yeah, imagine that. You'd actually have to do the hard yards, turn up to branch meetings, stand for pre-selection, rather than having it all handed to you on a platter because of your identity, which, as Andrew Bolt demonstrates, is exactly what she's used to.
Either way, this biased system she complains about, it's in fact showered her with jobs and sponsorships and platforms and appointments. And it sure helped Abdel-Magied as the token black Muslim female. She's only 26, yet the Gillard government and this Turnbull government have appointed her to various bodies, like the Council for Australian-Arabic Relations. The Turnbull government even sent her to the Middle East to promote her autobiography. Remember, she's still only 26. And the Prime Minister had her at his top table at his iftar dinner. The ABC, of course, made her the head of a TV show for reasons that the ABC's Media Watch explained recently.
Abdelmajid presents a roundup of ABC News on Saturday morning. She's also appeared as a guest on Q&A and The Drum. And she partly owes those roles to being Muslim, black and a woman.
Magid is unbelievably entitled. I've detailed before how she threw a tantrum and stormed out of Lionel Shriver's talk at the Brisbane Writers' Festival because Shriver ridiculed the notion of cultural appropriation.
And I think one of the things that really took this poor woman in Brisbane aback, the one who walked out, about my speech, is I was not reiterating everything she heard around her and everything she had been told to believe, that it was a difference of opinion.
Right.
And that was no longer acceptable.
And that makes her unbelievably immature and childish. But here's the kicker.
But get this. On the very day that Abdelmajid there complains, Parliament does not look like her, complains the system is rigged against people like me even getting into Parliament, on that very same day, across town in Parliament House, Lucy Gichuhi was giving her first speech as the new senator from South Australia.
Today, I, Mr. Murigo Gichuhi, humbly stand before you as the first black African-born senator in the history of Australia. I am deeply honoured to be given the privilege of serving the people of Australia as a senator. To all Australians, I say thank you. It is with this sentiment that I honour those who came before me, faithfully leading Australia to build the outstanding nation we see today.
Gichuhi wasn't complaining that Australia's racist, the Parliament represents no one. No, she instead said how much she had to be grateful for since coming here from Kenya. She reminded us of the greatness of this country and the richness of its rewards for those who join in and work. That was the best of Australia on display yesterday. The identity politics of Yasmin Abdelmajid, that was the worst.
Exactly. That's the difference between someone that's grateful for opportunities in life and someone that feels as though they're entitled to them. And that has nothing to do with race, gender, or religious conviction. Now, I was going to update the ongoing situation at Evergreen College, but I think that deserves a whole video of its own, so look out for that next week. Maybe. But in keeping with the theme I've been talking about of late, some good news on the kangaroo court system of sexual assault in the United States. Trump administration begins to dismantle Obama campus rape tribunals. So first, let's go back in time to Betsy DeVos's Senate confirmation hearing.
Would you commit, as Secretary of Education, to retaining the standard of evidence that is currently the law?
Well, Senator, let me just say my mom's heart is really piqued on this issue. Assault in any form is never okay. And I just want to be very clear on that. And so, if confirmed, I look forward to understanding the past actions and the current situation better, and to ensuring that the intent of the law is actually carried out in a way that that recognizes both the victim, the rights of the victims, as well as those who are accused as well. And
now, admittedly, Betsy DeVos is not the best speaker, but she did say something important, and that is to protect both the rights of the victims and the accused, something the Obama administration was not too concerned with. Of course, Senator Casey was talking about upholding the standard of evidence that had been lowered under the Obama administration to a preponderance of evidence. Also, as the article notes, whenever they had an allegation by some student that her Title IX rights had been violated by a college, they would not only look into the particulars of her complaint and fault the college for not giving her what she wanted, but they would launch a systematic investigation going back for years. Stuart Taylor, co-author of the book The Campus Rape Frenzy, The Attack on Due Process at America's Universities, and who I've talked about in previous videos before. They would even pressure the colleges to retry accused males who had been found innocent before, exposing these guys to double jeopardy. This practice demonstrated the rape culture narrative's insistence on over-exaggerating the likelihood of sexual assault on campus and pushing the idea that every woman who accuses a man of sexual assault should receive the benefit of the doubt. In fact, almost 9 out of 10 colleges reported 0 sexual assaults in 2015. And just to show you how ridiculous the 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 statistic is, Stuart Taylor crunches the numbers for us. The 1 in 5 figure requires that at least 2 million women on college campuses would be assaulted while in college, which translates to between 400 and 500,000 sexual assaults per year. The 1990 Clery Act requires every college to report the total number of sexual assaults, and between 2012 and 2014, campuses reported an annual average of between 4,500 and 5,300 sexual assaults, barely 1% of the expected number. And even if you accept that 65% of sexual assaults go unreported, the actual number is still 35 times lower than what would be expected. And just to give you a sense of how bad some of these cases are, here's Stuart Taylor giving an example.
I'll give you a real case, not a hypothetical one, and I can give you 40 probably, except my memory.
Well, there are about 100 young men suing right now. And
right,
to read through these cases is to go into Kafka's trial, but go on.
But here's a case at Amherst, and one thing that's striking about this and somewhat unusual is that the young man who was ejected from Amherst on a charge of sexually assaulting the young woman was in fact a victim of a sexual assault by the young woman. That's what really happened, and the evidence that proves it, text message evidence, was readily available to the college if they had bothered to look for it.
She was sending texts to her friends saying,
yes.
"Oh, I just did that," and he had been
it
passed out.
It starts with them, making out in a very sexual way in front of other people in some common area in the dorm. And somebody says, why don't you all go get a room? So she takes the guy back to his room. By her account, she was a little bit tipsy. By all accounts, he was passed out drunk or very close. She gave him oral sex for whatever reason she wanted to. It's not clear he was even aware this was happening. He doesn't remember anything. And then she sent him away, and she called in another guy who she'd been flirting with earlier in the evening and had more sex. And then she began to feel bad because, that first guy was my roommate's boyfriend. My roommate's away, but she's going to find out, and it's going to be very socially awkward with our friends. So she started telling people she'd been sexually assaulted. She joined a feminist anti-rape group on campus, and many, many, many months later, I think it was more than a year later, she actually filed a claim of sexual assault. The investigation by the college was ludicrous. Her testimony was incoherent. The whole thing was a giant fraud and apparently driven by Amherst's fear that the federal government would say they're not being tough enough on sexual assault. And then after he got the text message, and they kicked him out, after he hired a lawyer, the lawyer asked around, anybody got any text messages, got some text messages, and the text messages proved the facts that I've just told you conclusively. The guy took the facts back to the college, Amherst, and Amherst said, sorry, too late, you're kicked out, and it's final.
And he's kicked out and marked as a predator. And these people that get kicked out of college, they have a hard time getting into another school. And it's also devastating psychologically to be accused. You're seen as a pariah. I've read reports from psychologists what it's like to treat falsely accused people.
Exactly.
And it's psychically devastating.
We have too. And there's two aspects worth mentioning. One, these things are almost always done in secret. Federal privacy laws and so forth, which means it's impossible usually until a case gets into court. And this Amherst guy sued in court, which is how we know all the facts we know, to know what went on. And so the guy usually doesn't get on Google as a rapist, but everybody on the campus knows who he was.
Right.
And the word gets around, and there's a movement to put it on transcripts. And when he tries to apply to another college, they tend to turn him down. And so it has a lifelong effect, potentially a horrible lifelong effect. It leads to depression. It leads to post-traumatic stress syndrome. It defeats career opportunities. It's often regarded by people who are anti-rape activists as, the guy just picks himself and moves on. No, he doesn't pick himself up and move on. And I just should add, the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, has admitted unwittingly that this has done absolutely nothing, all this, to reduce the number of rapes on campus.
As far as I can tell, the numbers, even their advocacy studies, they've been doing them for years. The numbers never change. It's now they're saying 1 in 5, and they still have studies that it's 1 in 4.
And what Biden recently said was it was 1 in 5 20 years ago, and it's still 1 in 5.
Right.
Okay, you can do the math. It's done. Your program, Mr. Biden, has done no good at all.
And as I said in a previous video, those are the kinds of situations we'll be hearing about here in Australia if the ideologues get their way. I'll see you next time.